The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his lawyers, Ms. Brady, Mr. King, Ms. Nelson, Ms. Spengler, and Ms. Higgs. And the people are represented by Mr. Brockler, Ms. Pearson, Mr. Orman, Mr. Edson, and Ms. Tish McGuire. Are the parties ready for the jury, the people?
Yes, Your Honor, people are ready.
Is the defense ready for the jury?
Your Honor, I do have one brief matter for the court.
Yes. Go ahead, Ms. Nelson.
Thank you. Your Honor, on Friday, May 15th, when we were on break from these proceedings, the jury in the Boston Marathon bombing case returned a verdict imposing the death penalty in that case. This was headline news both nationally and locally, and we are concerned because of the parallels, obvious parallels with that case and this case, that jurors' exposure to the coverage of this verdict carries the potential for unfair prejudice against Mr. Holmes. And we're just requesting that the court conduct a general poll of the jury to determine whether they've had any media exposure to the coverage of the verdict in that case, and if so, whether it has had any influence on their ability to be fair and impartial in this case. To be clear, we're not alleging necessarily that there's anything wrong with the jurors having had exposure to the media coverage of the verdict in that case. However, it does become a problem if such exposure impacts their ability to be fair and impartial in this case. Obviously, there are a number of parallels between that case and this case. They are both cases in which the prosecution has sought the death penalty against the defendant. Both cases involved a significant number of deceased and injured victims, and in that case, there's just a fraction of the number of deceased victims that we have in our case. One of the victims included a young child, and there's been significant media coverage of both cases. And in addition, obviously the cases have been taking place during the same time frame. And we'd cite to Harper versus People, which is a 1991 Colorado Supreme Court case, 817 P. 2nd 77, which outlines a three-step process for trial courts to evaluate the possibility of prejudice resulting from mid-trial media reports. And the first step is just to determine whether the coverage has a potential for unfair prejudice. Second step is to conduct a general poll of the jury, and third step would be to just follow up individually with any jurors who have indicated that they have been exposed to any such media coverage. And we have a copy of the front section of the Denver Post from Saturday, May 16th, that we'd like to submit as a court exhibit just in support of this request. The front page headline in bold capital letters was "Death Sentence," and it includes an article with quotes from victims in that case calling this justice and a just conclusion, a quotation from the Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch, the top law enforcement official in this country, calling this an appropriate verdict, and extensive discussion about the statutory aggravator of the death of a child, which obviously we also have in this case. So our request is just that the court conduct a general poll of the jury about their media exposure to media coverage of this case, and perhaps it may be an appropriate time as well for the court to just inquire whether any jurors have had inadvertent exposure to any media coverage in this case. And we are making that request pursuant not only to Harper, but pursuant to Mr. Holmes' state and federal constitutional rights to due process, to a fair and impartial jury, and to a fair and reliable sentencing proceeding.
Okay, response?
Well, I guess the defense was just really surprised about what the jury did in Sarnav, because I can't imagine all of them didn't know a verdict on the sentencing phase was coming down the pike, because all of us knew that the jury was deliberating on that. If the defense was concerned about potential coverage of the Sarnav verdict, and we're talking about United States versus Sarnav in Boston, they could have asked the court to tell the jury, hey, there may be a death sentence coming down or a life sentence coming down. You should avoid coverage on that too. But they didn't. And now they're coming in as, it's a huge shock, apparently. It's a huge shock that the sentence in that case got media coverage, and that they could never have thought about this beforehand to ask the court to take some type of action if they thought it was a problem. They have not cited to the court any case where a verdict in an unrelated matter, completely unrelated matter, in another state, in fact, a state all the way to the East Coast, would somehow have a relevance in this case. The factual circumstances involving a multiple murder, yeah, sure, that's similar. I mean, there was a child killed, that's similar, but as far as I've been able to tell, and I haven't really been following that case extremely closely, I didn't see any plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, or whatever the federal government would call that in its system. I haven't seen that as mitigation in that case. The mitigation in that case was that his big brother apparently was a big influence on him, and that's why the defense said the jury shouldn't give him the death penalty. None of the issues that I see that the defense would be presenting as mitigation in this case, or that we would be presenting as aggravation in this case, except again for the death of the child, would apply. They're completely different circumstances, and there's no reason that the court should inquire of the jury as to whether they read something about a completely different case. I guess I could say, hey, Judge, maybe we should ask them if anyone watched Dead Man Walking on Netflix over the weekend, or some anti-death penalty screed. It doesn't, they can do that. It's not related to this case. And the defense has not shown that the court should make this inquiry, and I object.
All right, so the people not only disagree that this is necessary or appropriate, but you are objecting and asking the court not to do this.
Yes, Your Honor. I don't think we should inquire of the jurors as to information that they've acquired about a completely different subject.
Do you see any harm in doing it?
Well, Your Honor, we could ask the jurors all kinds of questions about all kinds of stuff they read.
Right, but the request is about this specific issue. So is there a harm in asking about this specific issue?
It's not about this specific case. It's about a specific issue in a different case. I don't see how it has any logical connection to the job that the jurors are going to do in this case. What happens to another? So does that mean every time there's a death penalty sentence in any case in the United States, while this case is pending, if it's in Texas or Arkansas or some other place, and it makes the newspaper, now that we should inquire of the jurors as to whether they've read it? If something else happens in another county, if there's an attack somewhere, do we now inquire of the jurors as to whether they've heard about it? The important thing to know about the jurors is what they hear about this case, not what they hear about other cases. So I see absolutely no reason to do it, and so that's, I guess, my answer to your question, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Nelson, can you get back to the podium, please? Ms. Nelson, arguably, by asking this, I'm calling their attention to it even more. So knowing that, you're still asking me to ask about this. Is that correct?
Yes, we understand that, Your Honor, and we considered that, but we think that in light of the possible prejudice, which is all we have to show under Harper, it's appropriate for the court to conduct just a very general inquiry of the jury whether they have had any exposure to the coverage in that case, yes.
And you want me to specifically reference the Boston Marathon trial, correct?
Yes, correct.
And what if I just say generally there was some news, there was some coverage of the Boston Marathon trial in the news this weekend. Is there anything in the news that anyone was exposed to that affects their ability to be fairly impartial? Are you okay with that kind of inquiry?
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Your Honor, our position is that the court, we're fine with the court just asking a general question, not mentioning the death verdict in that case, but just asking whether, generally, whether any juror has had exposure to the coverage, and leaving it at that. And then if people respond affirmatively, following up individually about what they've been exposed to, and then at that point inquiring whether anything they've been exposed to has affected their ability to be fair and impartial.
I'm not inclined to ask about whether anyone has had exposure. I think that the question that I propose covers that. So If people have not had exposure, then obviously they would not be prejudiced by anything related to it. If people have had exposure, then the question is does that affect their ability to be a fair and impartial juror in this trial? So I think it covers people who have had exposure and people who have not. So I will ask that general question over the people's objection. Let me just make sure that I make it clear that I don't believe that anything related to the coverage of the Boston Marathon trial has a potential for prejudice in this case. So I don't think that the defense has met the first step in Harper. However, in an abundance of caution, and because the defense is asking me to do this, I will inquire. But I'm only doing it in an abundance of caution and only because the defense is requesting it. And I'm only going to ask it in a general way. I have talked to the defense about the fact that this may call more attention to the Boston Marathon trial. Having had that discussion, the defense persists in its request, and so I'm going to go ahead with it. But I don't believe that anything about that trial that was reported this weekend has the potential for prejudice. So I think the two cases are very different. Mr. Orman highlighted some of the differences between the two cases. Yes, they're both death penalty cases, and yes, they both include multiple injuries and multiple victims, but that's generally where the similarities end. There are a lot more differences than similarities between the two cases. But since the defense is specifically asking me to do this, I will do it. I will make a general inquiry, okay?
Very well. May I have just one additional moment, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I haven't submitted a court's exhibit before. Will the court staff mark it?
Yes, you can mark it as Court Trial Exhibit 22. So C-TR-22. And we can provide you an exhibit during the break and get it marked.
Very well. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. All right, anything else before we bring the jury in? All right, let's bring the jury in, please. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury's back in the courtroom. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are you? Good. Did you have a good weekend? Yes. Good. All right. I'm glad you did. It's feeling like Seattle anymore around here, and I hear that the rain is going to continue and even into the Memorial Day weekend. So, yeah, just great, right? Somebody had a thumbs up. Before we start, I have a question for you, a general question. There was coverage of the Boston Marathon trial this weekend. To the extent that any of you had exposure to that news coverage, is there anything about that news coverage that you believe affects your ability to be a fair and impartial juror in this trial? And everyone's saying no. No one's raising their hand. Okay, great. And you may not have been exposed to it, and that's okay. So I just needed to ask that question. All right, nobody raised their hand, and everyone is saying no and shaking their head no. All right, with that then, we'll proceed. Would the people please call your next witness?
The people recalled Maria Petalina to the stand.
Good morning again. Please have a seat.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I remind you that you're still under oath, okay?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Pearson, you may continue with your direct examination of CSI Petrolina.
Ms. Petalina, I'm going to hand you what have been marked as People's Exhibits 3818 and 3819, as well as Exhibit 639, and 639 was admitted last week. Do you recognize the photographs 3818 and 3819?
Yes,
And do they fairly and accurately represent what you observed in the theater as you were taking evidence out of theater seats and items in the theater?
yes,
Your Honor, I would move for the admittance of People's Exhibits 3818 and 3819.
Any objection?
no objection.
Without objection, P-TR-3818 and 3819 are admitted and may be published.
And could I have up 3818 first? Now, we were talking a lot about Theater 9 last week. What are we looking at in this photograph?
This is a photograph that was taken after we removed additional items of evidence from the seats inside of Theater 9.
And in the first row, row 8, at the beginning of the stadium seating, do we see some seats that are missing from there?
Yes,
And are those the seats that we've previously seen in this courtroom that were taken from the theater?
correct.
Now, if you could also look at People's Exhibit 639, and we talked about this last week. These are fragments, are they not?
Yes.
And where were these fragments taken from?
These fragments were removed from the pole, the area that you can see in that photograph there in front of row 8.
If we could have 3819, please. We saw a section of pole, and we see an area that's cut out in this photograph. Is this where the pole was taken from?
Yes,
And do you recall what impacts were within that pole?
I do. Impact 9-3 and 9-4.
And is that where People's Exhibit 639 was from as well?
Yes.
Thank you. I am next going to move to Theater 8 and hand you what have been marked as People's Exhibits 3421, 3420, 3422, 3423, 3424, 3425, 3428, 3429, 3430, 3431, 3432, 3433, 3434, 3455. No, I'm sorry, 3435, 3436, 3442, 3437, 3438, 3439, 3440, 3441, 3444, 3445, 3446, 3447, 3448, 3449, 3541, 3542, 3543, 3554, 3582, and 3584. And I've already shown these to defense counsel.
Thank you.
Do you recognize all of those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And do they fairly and accurately represent what you observed in Theater 8 in July of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move for the admittance of People's Exhibits 3420 to 3425, 3428 to 3441, 3444 to 3449, 3541 to 3543, and 3554, 3582, and 3584.
Didn't you also have 3442, or did I write that wrong? Maybe you said 3542 and I missed it. Okay.
Let me check here. I do have a 3442. Did I?
Well, just now you moved to admit 3425 to 3425, and then, or you said 3420 to 3425, and then I thought you said 3428 to 3441, and that's why I asked the question, because I thought
You're right, it should be to 3442.
to 3442, okay. And then there is a 3444?
Okay.
Just go over the ones you're moving to admit again.
3420 to 3425, 3428 to 3442, 3444 to 3449, 3541 to 3543, 3554, 3582, and 3584.
Okay, that's what I have on my list, so, good. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-3420 through 3425 inclusive are admitted, 3428 through 3442 inclusive are admitted, 3444 through 3449 inclusive are admitted, 3541 through 3543 inclusive are admitted, and 3554, 3582, and 3584 are admitted, and all of those may be published.
First of all, Ms. Petalina, would you describe the layout of Theater 8?
Theater 8 had a similar layout to Theater 9 with 2 additional seats. So there were 417 seats in Theater 8. Theater 8 also had 2 exits with an entrance located to the west.
If I could have 3420 first, please. What are we looking at in this photograph?
This is an overall photograph of Theater 8 looking from where the screen was, so from the east to the west, which would be the back of the theater.
So looking at this picture on the left side, that would be the wall that would adjoin Theater 9?
Correct. On the left, that would be the south wall of Theater 8, which connected to the north wall of Theater 9.
3421, please. What are we looking at in this photograph?
Again, this is the south wall of Theater 8, the wall that connects to Theater 9, with several impacts identified on that wall.
Are the white things we see in the photograph on the green as well as on the dark color below it, are those noting impact points?
Yes, they are.
3422? Is this a photograph of the entire theater?
Yes.
And again, left wall is the wall that adjoins Theater 9?
Yes.
3423? Where is this a view from?
Okay, this is over in the north corner, the northeast corner of Theater 8, looking back at the south wall.
3424.
This is the hallway in Theater 8. If you were to look at the screen in Theater 8, it would be the hallway located to the left.
3425.
This is a photograph that I took from up top of the stadium seating in Theater 8, looking down at the screen, which was still intact.
3428.
Okay, again, if you were to be looking at the screen inside of Theater 8, this would be the right staircase, and this is from up top of that staircase looking down towards the south wall with the impacts labeled on that wall.
3429.
This is the south wall of Theater 8 with those impacts again.
3430.
This is the south wall with impact 8-1.
3431.
This is a close-up photograph of impact 8-1.
3432.
This is a close-up photograph of impact 8-2.
3433.
This is a close-up photograph of impact 8-3.
3434.
This is an overall photograph of that south wall showing multiple impacts.
How many impacts total did you find in Theater 8?
In Theater 8, we found a total of 16.
3435.
This is a photograph of impact 8-4, which was located in the curtain in that area that you saw in the previous photograph.
3436.
This is impact 8-5.
3442.
This is impact 8-6, which was located in the railing on that wall.
On that same wall that adjoins Theater 9?
Correct, the south wall.
3437.
This is impact 8-6, which was the impact in that railing.
3438.
This is an overall photograph showing impact 8-7 and 8-8.
3439.
This is impact 8-7.
3440.
And this is impact 8-8.
3441.
This is a photograph, again, still in the south wall with impact 8-8 and 8-9.
3444.
This is a close-up photograph of impact 8-9.
3445.
This is an overall photograph here of the wall located across from the south wall. So this would be the north wall. Again, if you were looking at the screen, this would be located in the right hallway leading back out to the entrance.
So this leads towards the entrance of the theater where the exit sign is?
Correct.
So the wall adjoining Theater 9, would that be on the left?
Correct.
And the wall that we're seeing here would be the wall where all the seats would be next to that?
Correct, directly across from that south wall.
3446, please.
This is a close-up of impact 8-10, which was located on that wall across from the south wall.
3447.
And this is impact 8-11, which was also located on that wall across from the south wall.
3448.
Okay, this area here is the right staircase, the staircase that I referred to earlier. And this is impact 8-12, which was located on top of the railing of that staircase.
And again, to the left of the staircase, would that be the wall that adjoins Theater 9?
Correct, the south wall.
3449?
This is a close-up of that impact on top of that railing, which is impact 8-12.
3541?
Okay, in this photograph, we're looking at the north wall in Theater 8. So in back of this photograph would be the south wall, which is the adjoining wall to Theater 9. So this is the opposite wall, which is the north wall.
And we see a ladder up on that wall and a white marker of some kind on the wall?
Yes.
What is that?
That is impact 8-13.
542?
This is a photograph of impact 8-13 in that north wall of Theater 8.
3543?
This is impact 8-13.
3554?
Okay, this is impact 8-14, which is located again in the south wall, so the adjoining wall to Theater 9, and this was found in the curtain.
3582?
Okay, and additional holes were also found in that wall across from the south wall or the adjoining wall, and this is impact 8-15 and 8-16.
3584?
This is impact 8-16.
So is it accurate to say that the impacts in Theater 8 were located, and you can take that down, in the wall adjoining, in the area across from the wall adjoining that's next to the stairs, and there was one impact all the way across on the opposite side of the theater?
Correct.
I am next going to hand you what have been marked as People's Exhibits 3822, 3824, and 3826. Do you recognize those photographs?
Yes.
Do they fairly and accurately represent your observations in the theater in July of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admittance of People's Exhibits 3822, 3824, and 3826.
Any objection, Ms. Spengler?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-3822, 3824, and 3826 are admitted and may be published.
I won't publish those quite yet. Now, as you were marking impacts and photographing in Theater 8, did you also collect items of evidence?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you what have been marked as People's Exhibits 623 and 624. Do you recognize those items?
Yes.
Are they items that you collected in Theater 8?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admittance of People's Exhibits 623 and 624.
Any objection?
And object to 624, may we approach?
Yes. Okay, the objection is overruled. Go ahead. That means that P-TR-623 and 624 are both admitted.
Turning first to People's Exhibit 623, could you hold that up and explain what it is and where it was located?
This is a fragment that was found inside of Theater 8 at row 8, seat 13.
And in Theater 8, are the rows numbered the same way, would they be numbered the same way that they were in Theater 9?
Correct. 1 through 7 would be on the floor, and then 8 through 20 were in the stadium seating.
And if you could tell us what People's Exhibit 624 is?
These are ticket stubs collected from inside of Theater 8.
What are they ticket stubs to?
The Dark Knight Rises at the 12:01 a.m. show on 7/20/2012.
Thank you. I am next going to hand you what has been marked as People's Exhibits 625, 626, and 627. Do you recognize these items?
Yes.
Are they items that you collected in Theater 8 in July of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admittance of People's Exhibits 625, 626, and 627.
Any objection, Ms. Spengler?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-625, 626, and 627 are admitted.
Turning first to People's Exhibit 625, if you could tell us what that item is.
This is a fragment that was located in the right or south hallway of Theater 8.
And the right hallway would be the hallway that would adjoin Theater 9?
Correct.
People's Exhibits 626 and 627, if you could hold those up and tell us what they are.
These are additional fragments that were located in a crawl space underneath of that right or south staircase in Theater 8.
So if you can explain to us now where this crawl space is located?
Sure. If you were to enter through the entrance of Theater 8 and proceed to the right or to the south, underneath of that right staircase was a crawl space area that was accessible by removing a fire extinguisher so that we could go inside of the wall.
And now if I could have up People's Exhibit 3826, which has been previously admitted. Once you marked all of the impacts and holes in Theater 8, did you begin to collect evidence and fragments and things from Theater 8?
Yes.
What are we looking at here in People's Exhibit 3826?
In this photograph, to the left of the photograph is that south wall, the adjoining wall, with pieces of that wall removed. And also across from that wall, the south wall, is the railing that we talked about earlier with impact 8-12 and a section of that railing that was removed.
If I could have 3824, please. What do we see in this photograph?
This is a section of the south wall that was removed, as well as that railing again that we also removed.
Let's see if I can get 630 and 631. One more piece. Turning first to People's Exhibit 630, which is the railing, I believe. And if you could that 630, is that 630?
I don't see the exhibit number on it. Oh, here we go. Yes, 630, I'm sorry.
If you could hold that up for us and explain what that is.
This is the section of the railing that was removed here in the photograph, which contained impact 8-12.
And, okay, you can go ahead and put that one down. And 630 and 631, if you can explain what those are. Here, let me get you some gloves, we'll take them out.
Are you moving the admission of these two exhibits, Ms.
Oh.
Pearson?
I am, Your Honor. Let me move for the admission. Are these all items that you collected from the theater?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admission of People's Exhibits 630, 631, 631A.
Is there any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-630, 631, and 631A are admitted.
I can get some.
Dash one first.
Yeah, we just want to see that one first. We can take it down here and get the wireless mic. And if you could tell us what we're looking at in this exhibit.
This is a section of the south wall in Theater 8, the adjoining wall to Theater 9, with impact 8-1.
Okay. And what is this exhibit?
This is impact 8-3, again from that south wall, the adjoining wall to Theater 9 in Theater 8.
And for the record, what exhibit number is that, Ms. Pearson?
Let me clarify that. The impact with 8-1 is 631, right? 8 is 631, or 8-3 is 631. I'm sorry, let me start over. Impact 8-1 is 631A, impact 8-3 is 631. And are you able to see on the back of these where the impact went through?
This is the back of 8-1 that shows a perforating hole.
Some of the jurors in that cell.
And this is the back of 8-3, also with a perforating hole.
And again, 8-3 was exhibit 631, and 631A had impact 8-1. I'm now going to hand you what has been marked as People's Exhibits 643 and 634. Do you recognize both of these items as pieces of the theater, of Theater 8 that you took out in July of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admittance of People's Exhibit 634 and People's Exhibit 643.
Is there any objection, Ms. Spengler?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-634 and 643 are admitted.
If you could hold up People's Exhibit 634 first of all, and if I could have up photo 3822. What are we looking at in with this exhibit?
This exhibit is a piece of the north wall in Theater 8, which included impact 8-13.
And what are we looking at 3822?
This is the area of that wall, the north wall that we had cut out.
And the north wall, that's the wall all the way across the theater.
Correct.
And People's Exhibit 643? What is that?
This is a spent bullet that was removed from that area, the area of impact 8-13.
So the impact that was in this wall all the way across the theater.
Correct.
Your Honor, did I move the admission of 634 and 643?
You did.
Okay.
And they've been admitted.
Thank you. After 3 days, I don't have any more questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Spengler, do you have cross-examination?
I do not.
All right. The jury may have some questions for you, so if you would give us a moment, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Would counsel please approach? Investigator Perolina, the jury has submitted some questions that, based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, I have determined are appropriate. The first question is, what do you mean when you call an exhibit a projectile item? And apparently, it's referring specifically to Exhibit 587.
When we use the term, Investigator Carol and I, when we use the term projectile, we use that term as well as fragment, but the projectile was to indicate that there was a tip from the bullet that was collected. So not just pieces of the bullet, but there was a tip included in that.
The next question is, how wide are theaters 9 and 8, if you know?
I do not know.
Any follow-up questions based on those questions, Ms. Pearson?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up questions based on those questions, Ms. Spengler?
No, thank you.
May this witness be released from her subpoena?
She may, Your Honor.
Is there any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd ask that she remain under subpoena.
Okay. All right, you're free to go for now, but you may have to come back a fourth time at some point, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, I would ask to publish the exhibits that aren't drywall to the jury.
Okay, let's do that. We'll take a moment to do that. Ms. Gerlings and Ms. Nagel, if you would, please. And we have gloves again, if anyone wants gloves. While the jury is doing that, would counsel please approach for just a moment? The record should reflect that we just finished publishing the exhibits the people requested be published at this time. Members of the jury, it's almost 20 after 10, so let's go ahead and take our morning break. Please keep all my advisements in mind during the break, but otherwise enjoy the break, and I'll see you back here at about 10:40, okay? 20 minutes. Thank you. The record should reflect the jury has exited the courtroom now. Everyone may be seated. Is there anything we need to talk about at this time during the break? Ms. Pearson?
Your Honor, I'm going to approach with what we've marked as Court Exhibit 23. I think that's the next one. It was the original car video of the robot with the car video. We provided another one to the court that did not have audio in it. This is the one that we originally admitted.
Okay, so this is the one that had audio in it. Okay, great. Anything on behalf of the defense?
I would just ask if the next witnesses are not going to be using the evidence that was just introduced, that we clear it from the courtroom or put it away somehow.
Well, we'll see what we can do. I got to give my staff a break too, but at the latest, we'll do it during the lunch break, okay? All right. Enjoy your break. I'll see you back here in 20. Thank you. The court will be in recess.
All rise.
That's the court exhibit.